Good morning. My name is John Towler and I serve as an honorary priest in the newly formed parish of Fordingbridge, Hyde, Bremer, Hale and Wood Green. Today is the feast of St. Margaret of Antioch, a saint dear to my heart because the parish church in King's Lynn in Norfolk was the place that spawned me into the priesthood. How irresponsible of them, I hear you cry. For better or worse, here I am, toddling along and in what they call in business terms, endeavouring to bring added value to the ministry team. What I love about St. Margaret of Antioch is that she may never have existed. Many scholars believe she is a fictitious saint, being confused with Saint Marina, a 3rd century saint from Turkey. She was, however, very revered in the Middle Ages. And for me, she stands as a symbol of the importance of myth, of story. Myths are stories of how people of all ages have found their way around life, and certainly she was important to many people in the Middle Ages. Stories like that of St. Mary of Antioch were created to exemplify some noble characteristic to help the faithful in their search for God. The story is told of how Margaret slew Satan in the form of a dragon with the sword, thus underlying the perennial truth that good overcomes evil, light overcomes darkness, and love overcomes hate. We, of course, have wonderful mythological stories for our day. And for me, Star Wars is a fantastic story. And at its heart proclaims a similar message, the perennial truth that the light of Luke Skywalker overcomes the darkness of Darth Vader. Now, all our personal stories are to be seen as part of what Richard Rohr calls the big story, the story of God's salvation of the world, in which I have had the privilege of being caught up in for more than 70 years. My journey continues with wrestling with God on a daily basis as I try to make sense of what my calling means to me right now. So what follows, I thought, since St. Margaret Antioch was the spawned me, I thought I would share my early story, a journey gradually unfolding of how I was called with so many ups and downs to the priesthood. God is certainly faithful. I remember as a young lad of 14, perusing a black and white pamphlet which I picked up at the back of the Church of St. Margaret. It was entitled, "Who Would Be a Priest?" What a good question. I remember the rather depressing picture on the front of a young man carrying a suitcase with apologies to Gary, it was carrying a Macintosh over his arm and walking by a rather overawing granite-built house. When I reflect on the jazzy marketing world in which I now live, what happened? I read it, fairly dull as I remember, but something stirred in me that nagged and nagged until God caught up with me many years later. I was sent to Sunday school by my parents, and I found it utterly boring. So at the age of 7, I waylaid the organist one Sunday morning and asked him to visit my parents to allow me to join the choir. Ooh, they looked so good in their crimson cassocks, walking in the dignified way into the choir stalls and taking place in this amazing drama. And what a drama. My fondest and exciting memory, however, as a young boy, was singing in the garden of Sandringham Rectory in the presence of Queen Mary. Wow. I loved the choir. Half a crown a quarter, another half a crown for weddings. And I just loved being part of the drama of liturgy. We had wonderful curates who were very encouraging, asked me out to tea and trips, but did not talk much about being ordained, funnily enough. Then a curate called Gwyn took me into his confidence, prepared me for confirmation, and this was a significant moment. I remember my confirmation was conducted by a lovely bishop, Bishop Patrick Leonard of Thetford. And I remember Gwyn actually saying in our preparation class the day before, I think, the confirmation, no Brill cream, boys. From then on, my formation to the ministry felt like a process of osmosis, as I gradually absorbed something of the discipline, the faith, and the humility of the clergy around me. So what did I do when looking for a career? Well, my first thought was I wanted to be a pharmacist, God knows why. Then a marine biologist. I studied zoology and botany at A-levels, failed them both. I think I was in love with the wonder of God's creation rather than the messy jobs of dissecting frogs and classifying plants. Then I wanted to become a teacher. Gained a place at St Mark's College, Chelsea in London, and then failed A-levels again. Miserable. I was clearly being observed by my vicar, a wonderfully warm and loving priest who literally stopped me in my tracks and physically putting his hand on my shoulder and said, "John, God wants you to be one of his priests." "Oh no," I said. I had been effectively running away from my 14-year-old fantasy, and now I feel I had been caught out. It took another 2 years. Aubrey, the parish priest, was appointed Bishop of Lynn, and another man, totally different, Eric Turnbull, a very shy, highly intelligent and artistic soul, helped my transition to what was then ACCM for a selection conference. I think that meant Advisory Council for Church Ministry. Now that is the beginning of a painful story. Breaking the news to my family was traumatic, to say the least. My mother was on the whole supportive, but did not really understand why I wanted to do such a thing. My father, alas, was distinctly hostile, and in a spell of being bedridden from sciatica, which must have been very, very painful, in a heated moment from his bedside, said I would not be welcome at home if I went ahead with the selection conference. Glad to say the Holy Spirit was working overtime. My mother packed my bag, shoved pound notes into my hand, and kissed me goodbye to catch the train, which was going to Ridley Hall, Cambridge. And her final words were, "I will sort this out with your dad." And indeed she did, because a few weeks after my return, when I was in the house alone with my dad, and I remember him repairing some floorboards in the sitting room, and I remember him turning around to me and said, I think I spoke out of turn the other day, and it's fine, it's okay." I remember little about my selection conference, except I was befriended by a Franciscan, Brother Peter, I think he was. I remember feeling out of place, a working class lad, and dressed like one, alongside men who I perceived more intelligent, sophisticated, and fitted the role in a way I would be unable to emulate. I do remember the excitement and apprehension of receiving my acceptance letter. Throughout this time, I became a server, fulfilling roles of crucifer, acolyte, thurifer, when allowed on special occasions, and I joined the Guild of the Servants of the Sanctuary with my peers, venturing to different churches to sing our plain song office. I graduated to the men's section of the choir to sing alto, which brought wonderful opportunities of introduction to things like RSCM festivals and the like. From my chorister days, I caught a sense of the mystery and the numinous in worship. I gradually formulated my Christian belief, but it was faith in what Paul Tillich now beautifully calls the beyond in the midst. And this carried me. I agonized with virgin births, the picture of a wrathful God in the prayer book, living with a low self-image and imagining that was being humble. But God hauled me along by my coat straps and has continued to do so to this day. I eventually made theological college after a dry run at the Hostel of the Resurrection in Leeds, a hall of residence run by the fathers of the Community of the Resurrection. And here is the beginning of another story for another time. Thank you for listening.